I couldn't possibly remember the first time I met Bert. I was conscious of him when I was a student, and that was post-war at the National Art School. Would have been about 1946, seven probably. The government allowed ex-service people, men and women, to apply to do a course of their choosing after the war to help to fit them back into civil life.
I met Bert in 1970 through the tin sheds at the University of Sydney. Quite notoriously, Donald Brooke and Bert Flugelman and somebody else, I think, had freed the unoccupied tin sheds that had previously been occupied, I think, by the CSIRO on City Road, and turned it into an art workshop.
After a period of time, the Yellow House sort of withered away from, exhaustion, if you will. And one of the other artists there was Tim Burns, and he said, "Oh, you should come down to the tin sheds. There's this great thing that's happening at part of the Sydney University." And ultimately, the photography tutor who was there when I first came to the sheds, Bill Murray, had moved on to something else, and there was a photography tutor position open, and Bert Flugelman, who's the director at the time, offered it to me, and I gratefully accepted, and that's how I came to know Bert.
I first met Bert at St George Tape, and I was an apprentice woodcarver. I was working on antique reproduction furniture, and my boss sent me to art school to do sculpture on one morning of the week. But I really enjoyed the classes and the students, and I remember saying to him, "I'd like to do this full time," and I remember him just saying, "Why not?" It was just it's just something that it was just very encouraging and inspiring in general.
I've been a woodworker all my life, and I saw this opportunity. Dorothy came home one day. She said, "They're going to start a sculpture department, and so, it might be an opportunity for you to go up there." So I went up the next day and had a word with Bert. And Bert he wanted somebody, that knew how to weld and knew how to put bits of timber together and stuff like that. So we sort of gelled the first day.
Well, I first met Bert in the late 1980s when I went to Wollongong University Art School, School of Creative Arts. And I suppose for me, I was a mature age student. I'd worked in the private sector for 10 years, and coming into a very creative art environment was a bit daunting. And I'd heard of Bert Flugelman, obviously, and so when I first met him, I think, like a lot of the other students, were a little bit intimidated by Bert. He's a very charismatic fellow. He kind of filled a room. And so, but I've always found him to be very, very affable and easy to work with and to talk to. And so, yeah, it was actually a great experience.
I had a kind of a dream to be a fabric printer and an artist, so it was an application to Wollongong University to the Creative Arts degree. And I was received very well. I was a mature age student. I already had some life experience, and particularly in Bert's case, he saw that I was very skillful. I could do a lot with tools. I had good hands. I still have good hands. And he could see straight away that he could put me to use.
I think the thing that I remember most about Bert, again, is his single-minded attitude about his own work. And I think the best evidence of that probably, during that time at the tin sheds, he became interested, like we all did, in the advance of conceptual art. And that happened in Australia a bit later than other parts of the world, in the 70s, exactly when we were at the tin sheds.
It was multidisciplinary, and it was a site for resistance. Most notoriously when the bolt cutters from the sheds were borrowed to free a draft resistor who had been arrested on the front lawns in part of the anti-Vietnam demonstrations. So it was a fabulous time, a real ferment.
Oh, well, yeah, there was a dynamism that Bert had that, you know, would obviously, you didn't have to be around him for very long to realise that, you know, there was this sort of amazing energy and sense of inquiry and curiosity. And, you know, yeah, Bert had it in droves. And, yeah, people would sort of just, they'd migrate to Bert, like moths around a flame, you know, zoop. Yeah, I mean, the tin sheds were sort of on the go, you know, in the early, quite early in that piece. Yeah, there was a lot of interesting things going on, and Bert was in the thick of it, you know.
I think the overall impression that I got is of Bert is that he put up with us. You know, he was the director of the Tin Sheds, and he was a dyed-in-the-wool official artist, and we were these lumpen proletariat making waves, and probably the waves that we were making was not working to his best advantage with the administration of the university, because Colin, for example, put a loft in the office, in Bert's office, where he lived. So he put a mattress up in the loft. The posters that Colin would make were overtly political and sometimes fun, but we would paste them up at night around the university and around Sydney, and it was pretty well known that Bert's mob of merry pranksters were, you know, running a 24/7 kind of happening place, and Bert allowed it. There was never any question about the rigors and the structure of officialdom. You know, Bert was just happy as long as I turned up to do my few hours a week teaching however many students turned up to use the dark room.
There were people around the tin sheds who were doing all sorts of funny, odd things, the sort of things which no commercial gallery would touch with a barge pole, and which no state gallery would even show.
And there were a crowd of young, energetic, curious people in a whole range of areas, not just fine arts. I mean, there were sort of physicists and you know, electronics people that got involved with ideas that Bert would spin off, you know, and they would be playing around with all sorts of crazy things. I mean, it was, yeah, the tin sheds was just a ferment of activity going on. And yeah, there were a lot of people involved. And yeah, Bert was sort of somehow just sitting at the centre of that, you know, feeding it. He was good, yeah.
In all of that, Bert not only maintained different kinds of classes and workshops, particularly for architecture students, but others in the university could join, but he also maintained, I think through his conversations with Donald, a position that was emerging in Sydney at the time, which was that basically an art project followed the making method or material that the concept dictated. So this was the beginning of conceptual or post-object art, and for that reason the Sheds was resolutely multidisciplinary.
Bert had been called at various times in his life, instead of Flugelman, Flugelhorn, you know, as kids ribbing each other, he had told me this. And I think that he was burning the euphonium or burning the flugelhorn conceptually. I could be wrong. I mean, I haven't gotten into his brain, but it occurred to me at the time he was trying to divest himself of this moniker. But I think that's the idea of doing it as a performance was certainly in the air worldwide. But doing it to the euphonium, I think, came from being ribbed as a kid, making fun of his last name. I think perhaps that's where it came from.
The feathered offers and the cubed trees were really Bert's conceptions, I think, you know. It was to be done when Donald Brooke wasn't there, and would arrive in his office on Monday morning and find it feathered, you know. And I happened to be working for Donald at the time, so you know, I had the keys, you know. And so, well, that was, I can't say anything more about it, except that it seemed to be quite a successful, you know, sort of an environment which provoked quite a lot of words from Donald in his, yeah. And got published in the Studio International, actually, with the Bridget Riley one. There's a picture of it in there. Art at the Universities, it's called. But I think it's light-hearted, just light fun, really. That's all. Some sort of angry young man, you know. But Bert was more balanced and had a sense of humour, you know. And he, in a way, held it together. You know, he was like a father figure. I think a sort of stable point. I think that's important.
Well, I think Bert was the sort of teacher that he was very generous in terms of his knowledge and his time. Always had time for all the students. I feel he didn't. You know, he wasn't selective and maybe, you know, concentrate on particular students who were showing, you know, maybe exceptional talent, or, and so he was very generous with everyone and helped everyone. And I think regardless of who you were as a student, I think you always felt that you could get the best out of yourself.
He gave me, at least, and I believe he gave Paul Ryan, a sense of freedom of expression, a sense of belief in your own creativity, and of course criticise. And he would criticise by way of asking you what you think you've done, why, what's behind this. And then he would give you his opinion, whether it grated on you or not. He didn't give compliments out easily, you know, except to beautiful women, of course.
I remember once I was working on this painting, and he came up to me and just said, he just said, "You're kidding us." He said, said something like, "You're kidding yourself. This is hopeless." He just really tore me apart. He was right. He just had that way of being very frank and open.
I think he was a very good teacher. He was able to identify what students were doing and understand what they were trying to do and help them to overcome whatever problems they had.
He was a prodigiously talented person. He could make or do all sorts of things. So he could obviously draw and paint and cast bronze and, you know, weld and all these different things. And he was very good at passing on his skills.
And he was very sure of his own ability. And although he used to work a lot in stainless steel, I reckon his best efforts were in clay. For instance, he would show the students how to work clay, and he'd get a bag of clay and he'd punch it around a bit, and he would make 2 circles like that and build on them slowly but surely. And in the finish, you realised that he was working on the torso of a woman. And he used to build this from here to here. You know, just like, it was clever to watch him. He was very confident.
He always treated it as fairly secondary, but there were some quite lovely things that Bert made in clay. I can remember sitting down talking with him one day when he was making one of his ladies, and he said to me, "I'm coiling my memoirs." You know, and he thought, "Oh yeah, I can see that."
You know, I know some artists who can be terribly aloof. They won't speak to you. You know, but he was just easy, easygoing and a sense of humour. And intelligent reasoning, you know, he reasoned through things, and certainly had an amazing imagination. It was constantly inventing things. You know.
Well, I really liked a piece of his work that I believed was a self-portrait, and when I went up there the first time and saw it, it looked to me like a conquistador, you know, conquistador. He was a modern hero, you know, in his own mind, a great explorer of the art world, of difficult mediums and overcoming adversity.
He was very open and engaging, very charming, very welcoming. Ran a pretty tight ship. Didn't always sit well with the kind of hippie ethos of some of the other folk around. I do think that those two sides warred in him, the libertarian, the bohemian, and a kind of authoritarian that was sometimes there. I mean, he expected people to maintain written and unwritten rules, and he was infuriated when they didn't, until he was amused at their impudence, you know.
I mean, like, he'd try to be grumpy or something, but I'd never seen him grumpy or lose his temper or anything like that. He was just this easygoing guy.
Bert was very strong-willed. Bloody-minded, I guess, might be another way of putting it.
He was quite honest with you and told it like it was, and always gave you constructive criticism, and so you could move on to something else and didn't have to waste your time doing things that maybe weren't going to help you that much.
He was an authentic artist.
Yeah, it was just very. I mean, to me, he was the person that really made me inspired me to be an artist. Really,
It was really good fun.
I was always amazed that, you know, the stuff Bert could get away with. It's just wonderfully outrageous. Yeah. He had style just coming out of his ears, Bert. And dear man. Yeah, he was pretty special.